learning it over a screen is way harder than learning it in person.
I can't imagine how a lot of them made it day by day.
My mom still wants me to wear a mask every time I go to school.
Exhausted. It has been a long 2 years.
You have to wear a mask around the halls.
Loss of life and loved ones was a reality for many of our students.
I'm working to get back to where I used to be.
Not seeing my friends and being able to talk to them.
It was frustrating, exhausting, stressful all the time for a while.
Thank you for joining us for Unmasked, Lessons Learned During the Pandemic. I'm Ritenour.
And I'm Michelle Lee. Over the next hour, we're getting a rare glimpse inside the Ritenour School District and its mission to educate students during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The district had to close its doors in March of 2020. Teachers and students are forced to work remotely for almost a year before they returned to a hybrid schedule. Ritenour wouldn't return to 5 days of in-person learning until the fall of 2021.
And even though students went to class as normal, we have learned that for some students, school may not feel like it did before, but there is hope. We begin with Ritenour High School students, each sharing their own struggles and the efforts they're making to regain what many feel like they've lost. I guess the first question that I like to ask people is, how's it been going? Are you okay?
I would say for me, it's a little challenging. I'm overcoming slowly but surely. Things are still a little rough because I still have like my my habits from quarantining still. So a lot of still procrastination and slacking a little bit. But I would say slowly but surely overcoming.
Can I just follow up with that? Because I think it always takes such a big person to recognize that they have things to overcome. So I don't know, how did you come to that conclusion?
I used to be on top of everything. I'm still part of everything. I'm involved in everything. But my grades and my academics used to be high, as well as the extracurricular things that I do. And now that balance has not been the same anymore, but I'm working to get back to where I used to be.
Can you relate to that?
For me, it was a little different. When the pandemic first started, I picked up a job because I can make some money while I'm not really too focused at school because it was online. So I was just doing something to get by. I still got pretty good grades, but I also realized that if I build bad habits from the beginning, it was gonna get to me. Especially with my older brother, he always pushes me. So he got me to go into the gym, and he would wake me up at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and I really hated it. I really did. And it took me 2 months to get used to it, and then it got to a point where it just felt weird. It felt weird not to go to the gym in the morning.
I was always very involved in school, but I feel like I lost a lot of that freshman and sophomore year dealing with the pandemic. So I felt like coming into it, I was like, I'm gonna do everything. And I did. I started doing everything, getting involved in anything that I could, staying after school for late hours to do things. And I think my biggest thing, because I'm in student council, so my biggest thing was to build more community in our building because we lost that and people haven't gotten their real high school experience. And so it was just kind of big and important to me to bring that here. And I feel like at some point I got burnt out. The first 3 months, I was completely burnt out coming back into the building.
At first, I was excited to be virtual, and then I started taking advantage of the fact that we were virtual, and I got behind. And I'm a person that holds myself to high standards, so it set me back emotionally. I became very emotionally unavailable for myself, and it led to failing classes, I had to literally last 3 months had to do as much work as I can to pass my classes. Overall it was more challenging than it was, and I still haven't really overcame. It's been hard too.
How are you feeling today?
I'm enjoying being at school lately more today. It was actually a fairly easy day to be here.
Do any of you feel behind in school?
Yeah.
Yes, I feel like because of the pandemic that, like what he said, we didn't learn all that what we needed to in the classes.
I think too it was hard to go from like the virtual aspect to the in-person aspect. We had heavier workloads on Zoom because they were like, well, you guys are at home, you have nothing else to do. So they would give heavy work, but then like after they heard from us that we felt like it was heavy, they started like backing off a little bit. But then coming back, it was like, all right, everybody expected us to just hop back on the train and keep going. And it was just like, wait a minute, like, hold on. And it was hard to transition and like go back into those real piles of work and try to time manage better. It was just so difficult. And like being in the hallways, like that was the first time for me personally that like we were all on top of each other. And it was like, whoa, like I'm not used to being around this amount of people. It's been like 2 years since I've been around this amount of people. And so I feel like it caused a lot of anxiety for students, not even just myself. Like it was a lot to know like, all right, COVID is still a thing, but we're here. But it's like, we don't know, like we might get shut down in 2 weeks. Who knows? So it was just still, again, that uncertainty.
Gosh, I'm trying to, I empathize with you so much and trying to realize, I remember the day that I had to go back to work and I cried. I was just so overwhelmed because, you did too?
Yes. Me too. My third day back, I went home and I bawled.
Entire mental breakdown.
Did you have any friends or classmates that you lost track of during the pandemic?
Yes.
Yeah, most stuff.
That didn't come back to school or?
Yeah, like for me, I had 3 of my friends go virtual, and so I ran into 2 of them this year at the start when they had the welcome back to school ceremony. They did that for freshmen so we could actually have a tour of the building. But I lost track of them during the pandemic. I didn't have their phone numbers. We didn't keep in contact through email or any of that. So I just didn't talk to them for 2 years. And then so I ran into a few of them coming back to school, but one of them I didn't see until I just ran into her at the grocery store the other day, and it's like, oh, I haven't seen you for 2 years. How have you been? Like,
it felt weird just being around all those people, and like you looked around, everybody had a mask, and some of the rules were kind of iffy. So you said, did you feel physically unsafe? Sometimes I kind of did, because I was a little paranoid about the pandemic at first, because like seeing all those numbers just skyrocket, and then sometimes they would go down, and then the next day you would check, and then the numbers were back up, and I was like, what the heck is going on? So, and then like you have to wear a mask around the halls throughout your classes, but then you go to lunch, and it was just like, that's not to knock on the school, but I mean, how do you really avoid that? Like, it was just people everywhere, and obviously masks were down because you have to eat.
Were there other students that you knew of who may have been, where school would have been their safe spot?
Definitely.
Definitely?
Mm-hmm.
Are they okay?
From what I know now, yes. But I feel like some students, and I'm one of those kids that won't let you know everything that's going on because it's just something I'm one of those people that I don't like people to feel bad for me because I feel like that's bringing them down for me. So I just like deal with it.
I'm gonna get to positive things. I really am. I'm just wondering though, is there anything that you felt like you lost during this time?
Mostly academic progress. Yeah, like things that I felt like we should have learned, but we really didn't get to during virtual.
I like you used the word progress.
Yeah, for me, it was like almost like a roller coaster, because when they would tell me like, we're not gonna learn this unit, and then I would search it up just out of curiosity, and it looked extremely hard. At the time I was like, yes, like I really don't want to learn that. But then like now that I have to because my classes are just like a progression of the year before. So now I'm like encountering that same unit, but now it's harder. So now I'm like, I definitely would have been happy if we learned some of that unit at least. But I guess I understand why teachers would do that, because they're teaching online through a computer to kids that, like even myself, might not even be fully listening. So like there's only so much they can do, Yeah. So yeah.
I would say my biggest loss was probably finding myself. I had just got to a point where freshman year I struggled a lot in middle school, and I finally got to a point where I was content within myself. And I was I got told I was very outgoing. I always was with people. I was never the quiet kid, but then I came back to school and it was gut-wrenching when I'd hear people say, "You're not the same," and "You're so quiet now," and I lost myself a lot during the pandemic, and it was kind of a setback because I worked so hard to be content within myself.
Do you believe that you can find yourself?
I believe I can, but I don't think I'm at the place to yet.
While students dealt with the stress of virtual learning, many actually mourned family members who died from the virus.
Our Pepper Baker spoke with a school counselor who works with the young students, some who dealt with losing a loved one for the first time.
Hi, Johannes. Come on in. How are you?
School counselor Elizabeth Winters connects with her students in a number of ways.
So what are we going to plant?
Just having a presence, a space for children to have their feelings and to validate their feelings. There is healing in that.
It kind of feels nice, doesn't it?
Students in kindergarten through 5th grade are in the beginning stages of understanding their social, emotional needs.
How to make and keep friends, problem solving, just understanding basic feelings, right? And how to cope with those feelings.
Winters often uses small groups to help students who feel similar emotions, like grief circles.
A child who has just lost a loved one, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, they will not be able to function on the same level as somebody who's not experienced that loss.
The American Academy of Pediatrics estimated that between April 2020 and July 2021, roughly 140,000 children in the United States lost a parent or a grandparent to COVID.
The virus and not being in school really took a toll on a lot of us because you're at home all day, cooped up. You don't know if you're going to catch it. You don't know who has it. I lost lots of family members, friends.
Whether it was grief or just the loss of a normal school day, junior Kyla Williams knew it was taking a toll on her mental health. Reaching out to her school counselor, even just by email, made a difference.
We've just created a close bond, and if I need help or just need someone to talk to, she's always there.
And while some students can talk it out, others struggle with grief internally or have physical outbursts.
They're at specials right now, right?
With an education in mental health and fine arts, Winters found success in combining both.
So many ways to navigate the grieving process through art, and we made remembrance picture frames.
For some students, the pandemic was their first time losing someone close to them.
So having a space here is essential for their well-being.
Pepper Baker, 5 on your side.
Ritenour has 38 counselors, social workers, and therapists, plus more than a dozen others through the special school district and outside agencies.
All of those people support the district's 6,500 students. Getting back to normal has not been easy. Even when Ritenour returned to in-person learning, it came with a lot of adjustment and conflict. There was so much pent-up energy, and students had to relearn how to be around people.
So the amount of conflicts, the number of physical assaults, the number of fights that we experienced at the beginning of this year was not like anything that I experienced during my tenure.
Like you had
in
more
this district.
fights.
Absolutely, we did. And a lot of those conflicts were started around social media. Students would have strong thumbs on social media, and then when they're back in person with a person they might be in conflict with, unfortunately some of those conflict resolution skills had atrophied as well, and it was on. So thankfully, very strong team of administrators, very strong team of counselors and social workers to help students navigate those conflicts. But I will say without a doubt, the first semester of this year was the most challenging experience that I've had in my career.
Wow. Was it easy to flip a switch and to get people back into the right headspace?
No, it wasn't, and it very much was not, and even now, we're working to be better every single day. So it started off by making sure that we were giving grace and space for students and staff to be able to express where they were, to tell their story. If we're going to take care of one another, we have to give the space for people to take time to put a priority on their self-care, because we were seeing that we were working very hard, but we weren't at our best for students because we were at the end of our rope. And so, based on keeping our ears and eyes open, we called a self-care day, and in the future we may need to do the same thing.
There's no manual for how a school district should operate during a global pandemic. Dr. Brian Rich is the principal at Ritenour Middle School. He navigated uncharted territory with one mission.
Focus on what's best for students and make sure that your staff is supported throughout the journey, but we learned a lot of lessons. A buddy of mine in this profession says we're building the plane as we fly it, and that truly was what was happening here.
It sounds easy for you to say that, but just how difficult has the journey been?
Well, there's some ups and downs. I like to, as an internal optimist, I'm always looking at some of the positives.
Yeah.
Great resiliency shown by our staff and absolutely our students. So absolutely proud of what our teachers were able to do. But to say that it was easy, absolutely not.
How difficult was it for the students to transition into virtual learning? Because that's a whole new world for them.
Right, so I think that's the most impressive thing is that we suddenly overnight became what we call a one-to-one district where every student had their own personal device. We got those devices out to students back in the spring of 2020. Almost overnight, they needed to figure out ways to interact with their teachers, interact with their classmates online.
How many hats did you have to wear during all of this?
A lot of people wondered, as a principal with, during that virtual learning, with no students in the building, what does a principal do? We brought the work to them. So we were committed to bridging that school and home gap. We committed to home visits, showing up on students' porches early on. It was assistance with tech. But as the pandemic progressed and as our virtual learning went month to month, we found ourselves in a position where we needed to keep those relationships and those connections with our students. So basically any teacher that was not on a Zoom interface, actually live teaching with our students, we were farmed out into the community and knocking on doors, celebrating student successes, checking on students that were not logging in.
How important was it to have those wellness teams?
Right out of the gate, we knew we did not want to force cameras on. That became an equity issue for us. Some of our students, their backgrounds, maybe they weren't in a position to share with their peers what their background looked like. Maybe they were in a transitional living space. Maybe some of our students were logging on from restaurants or wherever they could get internet access. So we very quickly determined it was not going to be a camera on mentality. And so many of our students took us up on that. So our teachers were often teaching to full black screens.
Wow.
So that piece was essential. We needed to get out and see our kids.
One of the things that we saw during the pandemic was a lot of brushback from parents, a lot of confrontations verbally, because I think a lot of folks didn't quite understand and didn't want to be told what to do.
We did not need to convince our parents or our students that this crisis was very real. Loss of life and loved ones was a reality for many of our students, supporting the students through that trauma, and even some of our staff members. And I was proud of the fact that I was supporting a community that did take it seriously.
Students coming into the hallways right now to see them again.
Oh,
some masked, some unmasked, but to see them again in person.
Hey guys, good morning. Reminds us of what it is. That this is a calling for us to be with students, right? Not to be online.
Yeah.
So I know I speak for my entire staff. It's great to have the kids back in the building. Good morning.
What are you going to take from the pandemic that you think is going to make this a better school district moving forward?
A couple of things. All of our staff are worlds more tech savvy than they were before the pandemic. So we were kind of thrust into some professional development with our technology. I think there's a connectedness with students that we'll never take for granted again, those of us that worked through it in our careers. I know, as I said before, our wellness team is always ready to bridge that home to school gap as needed if a student's not showing up. We know from the pandemic we're going to get out and knock on doors and get on front porches and try to find where those students are at and build that bridge.
Mask, remote learning, and social distancing, it was all a part of everyday life for children during the past couple of years. Elementary school students that I spoke to definitely had opinions on all of it. So first of all, what was the worst part of COVID at school?
The worst part of COVID, I think, was learning at home. It was really difficult not having all of the materials I need to learn. Definitely.
Wearing a mask.
Really? What made wearing the mask tough at school?
Because it's just annoying.
Wearing a mask too because I have asthma and it's kind of hard to breathe.
Okay. I think working from home because when the teachers assigned the work, you couldn't find it most of the time.
Okay.
Probably working from home because very important stuff, like stuff we needed to know, sometimes I couldn't get through because it would be glitchy and it wouldn't work.
Mine would probably be not seeing my friends and being able to talk to them, which was kind of hard because I like talking a lot and seeing my friends and hanging out with them.
How was it getting help with your schoolwork at home from somebody inside the home?
So, well, my dad and my mom are both very good at math, but sometimes they'll get frustrated at me not being as good as them as math, so it was kind of difficult them helping me.
Okay.
Well, usually my mom is taking care of my little brother and my dad is at work, so I would just be sitting there trying to figure it out.
Usually, I would be able to just go ask my mom and dad for help because my dad would be literally at work from home. He would just be chilling downstairs, so I could just walk downstairs.
Most of the time I couldn't ask my mom because she was dealing with my sister, which is she was changing her diaper or trying to clean her up after eating or something else. And my brother wasn't a help because he's younger than me and he's also doing work on the computer.
When you look back at not being in the classroom and remote learning, do you feel at all that you fell behind in any way when it comes to learning and academics and getting the hang of things?
No, not really. Eventually, I got things, and I knew how to do them.
To be honest, I think I got a little bit better at some stuff. But if I'm being honest, I think I got worse at math because now I just suck at math. But I'm better at science and every other subject.
I feel like it was a lot easier learning in person because it was just a struggle on Zoom because then if your computer died, you would miss a lot of stuff.
Do you feel like when you finally got in the classroom that you had lost something, that you fell behind a little bit?
Kind of.
In what way?
I don't know. It just felt different. Mm-hmm. It just felt like it felt a lot different because you weren't looking at it like a screen. Instead, you're looking in a classroom with your friends and stuff.
Mm-hmm. When I was in Zoom, I got better in division when I was in Zoom. So I kind of like Zoom more.
That kept you from being distracted by other things, like you could concentrate more?
When we're in the classroom, people talk a lot, but on Zoom, you really don't, people don't really talk. It's more quiet.
I fell behind on math because during a lesson, my computer would die because I forget to plug it in at night. And the first day when we could go back into school, I walked in and everything looked different to me. And then when we went into math, it was confusing.
In the beginning, it was difficult because the teacher didn't really know how to work everything correctly. And it got easier moving on because there weren't as many distractions, because people could mute their mics and stuff, so I didn't have to worry about people talking next to me and I could focus on my work.
You get back into school this year. What was the one thing you were looking forward to the most?
When I came back, I was looking forward to, I'm going to be in 5th grade. I have a new teacher. I was looking forward to seeing my friends, talking to them again, basically recommunicating with them.
How about you, Gabby?
It was probably, whenever I first got into the classroom, I was excited to think about what activities we would do, what type of stuff. And I was excited whenever my teacher announced that we were going to do a lot more projects than tests, which was really exciting to me.
When I first walked in the classroom, I was kind of nervous, and I was scared what type of teacher I was going to have. I was praying I didn't have a mean teacher.
Have things returned to normal for you, or is it still a progress in motion?
It's still It's close to being normal. It's just not the same as it was.
So even though like the mask thing's been dealt with, my mom still wants me to wear a mask every time I go to school, and I hate masks.
It's getting normal. Like, some of my friends try to hug me, but I don't like people touching me.
When COVID hit, everyone had to pivot, but for Ritenour families who arrived in the United States for the first time during the pandemic, everything changed. Justina Coronel shows us how the district stepped in to ease that transition.
Wow, qué bonito.
In their new school, Isela and her children play Legos.
Necesitamos ponerlo.
Each piece builds new memories.
Marion Elementary has one of the highest Latinx populations, and that's where Isela Jaimes Arellano's kids attend. They moved from Mexico just a few years ago.
Mi pueblo se llama...
My small town is called the Amadoras. It's a really small village.
They settled in Chicago in 2016, moving to St. Louis last year.
Conocidos de aquí, amigos.
I know some friends from my village, and they told me it was cheaper to move here.
They recommended Ritenour School District for its bilingual resources. She admits the shift from one country to the next was difficult. Learning English made it even more challenging.
I almost felt alone.
Transferring to Ritenour changed all of that.
¿Y eso qué puede ser?
Her 12-year-old is bilingual.
¿Qué podemos encontrar?
As for her littlest one, she primarily speaks Spanish. What's helping right now is the teacher support.
Trata de ayudarme.
She tries to help me a lot. Everything she sends home is in Spanish, so I can understand.
However, remote learning was still hard to grasst.
For those of us that came from small villages at times, we didn't have electricity, let alone internet.
Feeling those same hardships are the Pablo siblings who attend Ritenour High. Yami and Omar say virtual learning lacked the connection they needed.
The online classes, it's more difficult because we was learn English. So when I was in online, I'm not learning the better because, you know, when you are in person with your teacher, he's playing like more better.
In the school, they explain us really well. Like if you don't understand, they show us things. And in the computer, it was like, okay, show your screen. And I was like, how am I gonna show you my screen? I don't know how to do it.
Buenas tardes, soy Aurea Maltman.
Virtual town halls in Spanish started in 2020 to help families navigate this new life and new way of learning.
Pero eso es lo que deberían hacer.
Adding bilingual counselors and staff members to the mix made the journey a bit easier too.
Pues es un secreto, ¿no?
Judy McGarth is a bilingual art therapist for the district's elementary schools.
Oh, ¿vas a dibujar la casa?
On average, she meets with 35 students a week.
Me parece como naranja, ¿no?
The kids express themselves on what they've endured.
Some students left without being able to say goodbye just for safety reasons, and so there's like sometimes that lack of closure.
She reminds them by drawing it out, it's okay to stand out.
Ser bilingüe es un superpoder, entonces, so like being bilingual is a superpower.
Vamos, vamos!
Martha Piñones also helps English language learning students at Ritenour's International Welcome Center.
Okay, adios, muchachos. This is our school for new arriving kiddos who are new to the country and don't have as good of English skills to be able to function in a big high school or a big middle school.
During the pandemic, the need for the center was even more important.
Adios. This year we've had a big uptick of students, as you can imagine, after the pandemic coming in. So we are at almost 90 students.
Piñones tries to provide resources to her students and their parents.
A lot of the kids ask about just immigration attorneys and where to get medical care.
She knows moving to a new country and the barriers it creates can be a big weight to carry. And her goal is to connect the students with each other and relieve some of that heaviness.
Small groups, therapy groups, just being able to see that others have a similar story is huge. And as sad as it sounds, like that they've all been in the hielera, that they've been through the desert in Mexico, and that they've, have immigration pending cases. All of that stuff helps them see like, I'm not alone and I matter and I can get through this.
As for Arellano, she continues to form her new life and in the process, hopes to build others up.
Me gusta llegar y decirles, no, pues mire.
I like to help new arrivals and say to them, I just got here too and I can help. It feels nice having someone despite not knowing each other. And they come to us too, and we can all become united.
Justina Cornell, 5 on your side.
The bilingual therapist at the International Welcome Center says beyond the trauma of actually moving, many of these kids face sexual abuse and gang violence in their home country. She tries to help and comfort them as they start a new life.
That is what keeps me up at night. The idea that we're not getting the learning outcomes for every student that we're after.
Students return to class after months of working from home. Coming up, dealing with loss and expectations.
When students were sent home in March of 2020, some did well, others not so much.
Working remotely was especially challenging for students who needed extra support. Pepper Baker shows us how the district helped those families make it work.
How are you? Good. Nice to see you today.
Husky Academy Director Matthew Berry.
How are you?
Makes it a point to greet his students by name every day.
What's up, Carlos? How are you? I'm so glad you're here today.
We know that if students don't feel a sense of belonging,
feeling better,
they're not going to feel a sense of learning.
He oversees Ritenour's alternative school for middle and high school students who face challenges that don't fit with the traditional school setting.
We have several different programs where students are able to access their learning, education, obtain their high school credits, and kind of do credit recovery.
These students may have to care for their siblings, balance work with school, or they may have behavior issues, and the pandemic only added to those stresses.
I read a statistic saying that about 60 or 70% of all mental health services that students have access to happens in the school. Building up on that access is important, especially after COVID.
Rob Eaton knows the stress of balancing life and remote learning all too well.
I'll be honest, I don't know how households did it if the parents couldn't stay home.
He has a 10th grader and a 6th grader.
I go from one end of the spectrum to the other. Brianna is gifted and excelling in everything she does, and then Noah is globally developmentally delayed.
The switch to virtual learning for a student who needs speech training, physical and occupational therapy required Eaton's wife to stay at home full-time.
Half of 4th grade, all of 5th grade, and a chunk of 6th grade, she sat next to him all day, every day.
He also worried about keeping his teenager on track.
Especially when you're talking about a high school student that needs credit hours and needs to be able to graduate.
There are some days that you don't want to get out of bed. You're so exhausted and tired and burnt out. I wasn't getting that connection with my teachers to just go up and be able to ask questions.
The sophomore ended up excelling in the virtual setting and decided to remain remote when other kids returned to school.
It's allowed me to adapt to changes, and it's giving me more of a independency.
With a sense of normalcy returning, Barry and Eaton are moving forward.
Exhausted. It has been a long 2 years.
We may be out in terms of COVID, but I think that we're still in kind of recovery mode where we are with learning.
Our kids might not have got the A's and B's that we were hoping for. They might not have, but you know what? They're alive.
Pepper Baker, 5 on your side.
Other than a little confusion with distributing the devices, Eaton praised the Ritenour School District for providing resources to the students working remotely. Caring for the physical health of students also became more difficult when students were sent home. 2 years later, the district's medical staff says they've learned a lot. The Husky Health Center opened just months before COVID-19 shut the district down. It provides pediatric checkups, medical exams, and even immunizations. After months of telehealth, the clinic staff says its behavioral health services have never been more vital.
We definitely overutilize our behavioral health services. So we do, for all our medical visits, not only are we taking care of their medical, listening to their heart and lungs, what medications they need, but also screening for signs of depression or even for our adolescents.
The district provides transportation for students from different schools during the day so that they can visit Husky Health. The only thing that's required is a signed parental consent form. The middle school years can be difficult for kids. They're asserting their independence from the parents, forming their identities, building friendships, just trying to figure out who they are and how they fit in. Now imagine going through all of that during a pandemic, isolated from your peers.
The first one is this. What were you looking forward to the most
when school got back in session in the classroom?
I was excited to actually see people and, you know, be in contact with them instead of just seeing them on a computer screen.
I was excited about seeing my friends and also making new friends that was inside my grade.
Okay.
Yes, I would say the same as Gianna did, but I was also looking forward to lockers for some reason because I wanted to be able to put my stuff in my locker and just be able to go back to my classroom. But unfortunately, they didn't do that.
So now that you got a locker, how excited are you?
Well, we haven't got our lockers yet.
What?
That was the problem.
This whole year.
This whole year, no lockers?
None.
Still backpacking it up and down the hallways?
Yes.
Hey, at least you're in shape, right? What were you looking forward
Well,
to?
same as all of them and same with the lockers. I bought a bunch of stuff and then they were like, no, we don't have any lockers. I was also excited to not be in bed all day because I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get dressed most of the day. I was just in bed and yeah, I just didn't want to be lazy anymore.
I'm sure when there was no pandemic, not going to school was pretty cool. But when you couldn't come to school because of the pandemic, how much of a bummer was it?
I would say it was a bummer with my grades because on the computer it was harder than in real life.
Yeah, I would say about the same. Being in person, you kind of you're able to have the teachers help you and they're not distracted by other things going on.
So as you guys came into this new school year, finally going to be in person and everything else, did you come in feeling like you're as smart as you could possibly be or as smart as you could possibly have gotten throughout the pandemic to that point?
Oh, well, I felt as smart as I could be to the pandemic because the stuff that you learned wasn't the same as the things that you would learn when you were in person.
Yeah, I feel like I wasn't able to get to learn as much, and it was a struggle. And I feel like if we were in person, then it would have helped.
Yeah. It was really hard. When we were virtual, it was hard to just not give up. And it was difficult because every teacher had, of course, every teacher teaches differently, but it was some teachers were not lazier, they just couldn't get as much done as others. And so I come back now and it's things that I used to love before are harder to learn now than they were from before we were virtual.
Okay. Now, one of the things that strikes me is that I said, if you wanted to take your mask down, you guys could. All of you kept your mask on, and that's great. And I'm glad that you guys made your individual choice to do that because that's how you felt. But as you look at what we've come through and what we're still going through, what has been your fears during this whole pandemic?
I was a little scared about leaving home because at first I got used to being there for a whole year. But then as soon as I came back home, I was a little worried about my brother going back to school also because you didn't know what was going on around the world.
Not being able to see your family members and socialize with the people around you as much as you could, I think really made a huge impact on everyone. So, and now I feel like we're all scared of socializing.
Yeah, I would agree with what Evie said about missing a lot of things, because at one point I did have to quarantine, and that was when I had my birthday, so I couldn't do anything for my birthday. I was in my room, sitting there, just nothing. It was not very fun.
So now you three did quarantines. Did you three do quarantines? You guys made it through okay without evidence? So I'm going to ask you three this question, because I didn't have to ever do that, and I always wondered what it was like to be isolated in that way. What was it like for you in quarantine?
Oh, well, it was kind of lonely because my parents go to work. So, when I was at home, I didn't have that much help. I had to just do it by myself. I searched up some tutorials, so that helped me out a little bit. And then the teachers didn't really help much because at the time that I was quarantined, they didn't have where you could join a Zoom meeting and they could help you out. It was just where you were left alone and had to check Google Classroom. Yeah.
So I was quarantined over winter break of this year. So I luckily didn't have any schoolwork to finish, but it was still really hard. I wasn't able to talk to my family, and I had plans to hang out with my friends. I couldn't do that.
I had such a big family that we had to quarantine for 28 days. So I pretty much almost, like, I didn't miss my birthday, but it was really close, and so that was hard because I couldn't plan anything to do.
So it's sort of like being in jail the whole time?
Yeah, that's how I felt.
One of the things that we're always taught that if you're able to survive something, it tends to make you stronger. So as we look at what you guys have gone through and to be here with me today, why do you feel like you're stronger? What makes you stronger now?
When the COVID or the whole thing started, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to survive this, not being able to go to the grocery stores or anything nearby. But since I made it through, it shows me that I can really do anything that I put my mind to.
I kind of took the whole COVID and quarantine thing as time for myself.
Yeah, I feel like I grew a lot during the pandemic. It was a rough start, and I feel like my mental health sort of depleted because I wasn't able to socialize, and I just thought that we weren't going to get through this, and I thought I was going to end up like that forever. But coming back to like where we are now, I feel like I can get through tough times, and I can just put my mind to anything, and I feel more determined than ever.
Social emotional learning has been just as important to get kids back on track, pushing academics less and focusing on the whole student. Imagine learning in 8th grade. You'd start high school virtually.
That was a lot for a 14-year-old.
By the time learning was back in person,
So we are the University of Missouri.
you're expected to start college prep.
Do you feel behind because you kind of missed that social, emotional component to high school?
Absolutely. I think there have been a couple of times where I've just been very frustrated that I have 2 more years left and it feels like I've just started. So yeah, I definitely think that I have a feeling of needing to catch up to something that I missed.
Social emotional learning is very real, on top of actual academic learning. After 306 days of being out of school buildings, there is so much catching up to do.
That is what keeps me up at night. The idea that we're not getting the learning outcomes for every student that we're after, largely due to the impact of the pandemic.
From hybrid learning to virtual academies, students today have more ways to learn than ever before. And teachers understand they need to meet students where they are.
So we need to see if they're grieving, how do we provide those supports? Because we can't expect you to learn if you're still at a level in your brain where you're thinking about, my mother, my grandmother, my friend.
Still, administrators paint a positive picture ahead.
We're looking at attendance on a daily basis, but those students that are coming, that are connected, they're going to start to thrive again.
What is something that you're looking forward to? Is it college? Is it your high school experience? What is it?
I definitely think the process of getting exception letters. That's a very specific thing I'm looking forward to. Not necessarily college, because with college comes work and, academics, but that's the point where I'm like, oh, I've succeeded. I'm good.
COVID didn't just disrupt education for our children, it thrust teachers, staff, and administration into the unknown. From challenges with virtual learning to worrying about their family's own safety, many were pushed to the brink. Well, let me just ask a really simple question. Are you okay?
That's a hard question.
Right.
It depends on the day.
It depends.
Yeah. I think that the trauma that these kids have endured is crazy. And I can't imagine how a lot of them made it day by day, because I know the struggles that they have now. And on top of that, there were so many other things that they were worried about. I know a lot of kids here at the high school, we would talk about attendance all the time. What can we do? And there was a time when they're like, look, a lot of them are working. They have to work in order to support their family. It's about whether or not they're going to have food on their table or go to school.
I would say just being caught off guard. I mean, I've been a teacher for a long, long time, and just with the social media addition to all of this as well. I didn't know what TikTok was in the first place. And so when the semester started, the first semester started, it was just a lot of things going on. I just wondered what in the world's going on. It was frustrating, exhausting, stressful all the time for a while.
Or how many of you struggled yourselves during the pandemic? Yeah.
Parts of it made impossible because if you aren't there with the students, there's a lot of things you can't do. And, you know, going home one day telling you're going to have an extended spring break that turned out to be the end of the school year. It's like, I went home that night and I cried because I didn't know what was coming for all of my babies. And so it was really tough because you didn't know what was coming and you didn't know. It's like, and we had the technology was thrown at us. It's like every teacher I know spent that summer figuring out how to do their job virtually for the first time in their lives. And it was so hard.
I think one thing that I thought a lot about, and I still think a lot about the next, like just the future years, just how many kids were struggling before the pandemic and how much more they're going to be struggling academically and emotionally for who knows how long. So I think that's one thing that I mean, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, there was just a hole in these 2 years, and that some kids, young people, might be dealing with that way into adulthood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There was like a distance, like a physical distance, but also an emotional distance that I think was really challenging. And just that feeling of complete powerlessness. Like there's nothing within our human ability that we can do to change this, to fix this, to be there in any other capacity. And it is as simple as like not being able to see students or not being able to be able to get those body cues, those physical cues of knowing what's going on and what's typical behavior and what's not okay, to know when to check in, as was mentioned before. But yeah, that overarching just powerlessness was something that I thought about all the time, being behind a screen and seeing a class full of kids behind a screen too.
How many of you thought about quitting in the last couple of years?
Retiring earlier. Getting that process going a little earlier.
I think for me, the hardest part with the pandemic, being in the medical profession and having to do different roles. I think throughout the whole 2 years that we were in the pandemic, my role changed like every month. You know, there was something new. You know, new information comes out, you gotta adapt. So I think it was a real struggle for parents and students with that. But for me, I think it was just feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you didn't have any control over what was happening. What made me decide I didn't want to quit, though, was that I love what I do. And I come in every day, and I give them my all every day.
It's not that I wanted to totally quit. It's because that sounded really bad. That sounded like, oh my God, you want to quit? Like, no. It's more of, it's about that piece of, like you said, okay, it's so much stress. You feel like that, okay, if these kids aren't getting what they need, then it's our fault, or it's my fault. And I didn't want to put all that pressure on myself. But like I said, I have to reevaluate and be like, no, this is why you're doing what you're doing, because you are making a difference.
What kind of support was helpful to you that you appreciated?
Okay, so when we first learned about virtual, and I'm thinking about my computer skills, that's the thing that I thought about retiring about, because I'm not gonna make this. And that first semester of this, I felt like a first-year teacher again. I worked hard. I mean, I worked as hard after school at the libraries every night, getting prepared for the next lesson to make sure it was right. And it started out with just making sure I had the next day's lesson. And I've been so used to having my routine for the week. And then it eventually got to, okay, I got this a little bit more. I got 2 days lessons. And then when it finally got to where I got back to getting a lesson for a whole week, and I'm gonna tell you, there were always teachers that when I tell them I learned this new and this, and I get all these emails, you go, man, you go. I learned this new thing. The Google Classroom, I know what that is now. Flipgrid, I know what this is. You go, Mr. McDonough, you go. And all this, and I'd always get those emails all the time that would just push me to continue to learn these things and give me the encouragement to do it. I get all the time.
Well, and then the kids being able to participate when you put in all that work, and them showing up and being online with you and really engaging in those online lessons and having those conversations and having fun, you know, when they do have their cameras on and they're smiling and we're all apart and we're at home, and that's not ideal, but if we can learn together and work together and have fun together, then that made those really long hours worth it.
Well, we're still in a pandemic, so how do we get out of it?
I feel like we're on the right path. Yes, we're making a lot of good strides. And it's not one of those things that we can just open up a textbook and say, oh, hey, well, according to whoever, this is what we should do. I think it's just one day at a time.
I keep wearing my mask purely because I've got all these little guys who are still scared and they want to wear their masks, and they like it when they see adults wearing their masks. And it's like, I'm fine wearing my mask all day. I've been doing it for the past 2 years.
Yeah, getting used to it.
So it's like, if they feel more comfortable with it on, I have no problem being the adult going, Miss Jessica's still wearing her mask, I can wear mine. I'm like, fine.
I don't know when that will be over or if it will be. So I think we're just going to have to keep working through that and supporting them as best we can.
What are you most proud of?
For me, I would say when we first went into the pandemic, I didn't know and realize how much family time I was missing. And so spending those 3 months with my wife, my 2 children, it gave me that sense of family time. I think everybody here at Ritenour did a great job. Superintendents, the principals, teachers, students, families, we came together in a very uneasy time. We worked through it and we came out.
It taught me how to be more flexible as a person, more flexible as a teacher, and I'm really proud of our kids. Like, even in the midst of all of this, they've tried and they've done the best they can, and so I'm really proud of what they've done.
Just all the things I've learned in technology over these last 2 years that I had to learn in order to teach, and I just did not think. You talk about teaching an old dog a new trick. Oh my goodness, I didn't think that I'd be able to do it. I thought we just have to get another band director that knows how to do this stuff. But just with a lot of support, a lot of help from a lot of teachers, just learning what I've learned and continuing to learn.
Even, last year when things got more lax, my dad passed away from COVID pneumonia. So it's sort of, it was like a double, you've got this bad memory with you, but just realizing and appreciating those that you have around you. And I'm really proud of our kids, like you guys said. They've been resilient.
To be a child living during this time and having to navigate and trust the adults in your life to take care of you with utmost trust is, I think, really impressive for them. And I think what I feel the most proud of my students especially, is just how accepting they are of each other and how hungry they were for community. Like, they were so willing and open to be vulnerable with each other and trust each other, even though they were essentially strangers.
Can I say I'm proud of our teachers too? Like that.
Yeah, that was
that's incredible.
I wouldn't have been able to do
and
that as first year teacher.
there are so many people that learn new things and tried new things with our students, and that's incredible. Those experiences they were able to provide even when our kids were at home. Good job.
Like I said, all the teachers I knew spent that entire summer doing nothing but learning how to, I was like, I know more about a Chromebook than I ever wanted to. So bad. And it's like, the parents got a better relationship with us at the office because they would call and say, I can't figure out how to get them on, please help me. And we'd get them on. And then I'd go to the teacher. I was like, when they got kicked out, I don't know what happened. So we'd figure out how to get them back on. And everybody worked together. And the district came together as a family. The kids grew together during it. And they're like going, I've never actually seen you in person when we came back. And they're like going, it's so nice to see you. Because it's like they missed a lot, but they also grew in a different way, and they've realized that they can overcome something that nobody else has ever had to overcome before.
I think our staff came together just in a new way that I had never seen before. We had everybody in the school helping to get these bags ready and these stickers on the Chromebooks with the username and password, and everybody's running around the school trying to get dry erase boards so all the kids could have something to do math at home, and expo markers, and we're going in different teachers' rooms, and how many markers do you have, and getting all that stuff together, I think really brought all of us together as a staff too. So that was a positive. And then just seeing the kids in their cars when they would drive by to pick up their things, and their parents, and seeing kids that you had the previous year that you didn't get to see at the end of the year.
It's as old and corny as anything, but continue to take one day at a time, keep pushing forward.
You've probably heard it, that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, the village here at Ritenour High School has come together to help senior Javon Chisholm, a young man who has had an unstable home life and lost the number one person in his life, his grandmother. Javon needed help navigating his life through all of those setbacks, including staying on the path to graduation, all during the pandemic. And the village had his back.
The cab pulls up at Ritenour High School, and Javon Chisholm gets out.
Morning. Good morning. How you doing?
Ready to continue his educational journey through the doors and down the hallways.
I want to go down the right path. I don't, so it just took me a minute to just realize it and just put in that effort.
The opportunity to learn has been a struggle for Javon.
It wasn't easy. Trust me, it wasn't easy.
Tough because of the circumstances surrounding his life.
I've been bouncing home since I was probably like 8.
He's a young man who came through a lot of struggles, losing family, being uprooted.
The pandemic adding to his struggles.
And not being able to meet with him on a day-to-day in person made it even harder.
Javon was staying at a place for children and teens in crisis when COVID shut things down.
I didn't get to see my family.
It is when Ritenour's village stepped in to help.
Going back and forth through the FaceTimes, going back and forth through all of the chat groups that we have throughout the school system to make sure that his needs were still getting met. You can go right into that.
The high school's crisis intervention specialist, Keaton Strong, refusing to let Javon fall through the cracks.
Having someone that's in his corner when he felt that he had no one else left in his corner.
He's a solid man.
See, I put a little smile on your face today, okay?
There is a realness about their relationship.
Mr. Stone, he was once, in my shoes, so, he know the game.
There is also a respect for Javon's progress.
His story is outstanding because, he had the opportunity to go in a different path that could have been negative. He chose a positive path.
Now, he's on the path to graduate on time.
Teachers, family members, it was just the support that kept me going. I want to see everybody that supported me, I want to see them see me walk across the stage.
Javon is proving that nothing can stop him. Not a crisis, not COVID.
It's most definitely possible. You can get through anything you put your mind to.
I can't wait for graduation. I'm probably going to be the loudest person at graduation for him.
Javon Chisholm is a shining example that if you put your whole heart into it, nothing can stop you, not even a pandemic.
He is so amazing, so inspiring. Well, as it drags on, experts say it could be years before we really understand its effect on students, teachers, and education as a whole. But it is clear that Ritenour is looking toward the future.
Yes, they are. We want to thank the Ritenour School District for allowing us access to their students, their teachers, and their staff for this program. And thank you for watching Unmasked, Lessons Learned During the Pandemic.